I think it was my second conversation ever with Steve that I asked him what he does for fun. And he said, I play basketball, which I thought was quite an interesting thing. And I said, oh, are you Steph Curry with the threes? He said, no, I'm a big man. I dunk on people. And I was like, wow, the confidence. I'm in it already. He's a tough guy. And I can tell you that yesterday, I was speaking to just a random person who happens to work with Steve in Compassion. Without even mentioning his name, the first thing he said, you're from the Beacon Church. Lots of people work at Compassion that are part of that church. Do you know what? Steve Blow, he's a top guy. He's fantastic. He's a great guy. He's so amazing. He's one of the best people that we have in our organization. So I want to tell you two things. One, he can dunk like anything, apparently. And two, he's a top guy. So I really want to commend him to you, and he's going to come up now and share the word with us.
Grant, that was really kind, but I haven't dunked for 10 years. I used to be able to, but I'm 40 now, so those days are beyond me. Let me start with a story. When I was young, back when I could dunk, at the beginning of my career, I lived in a small town, but I was studying up in the much bigger city of Birmingham, and every day as I walked to the college, I would see this exciting-looking restaurant. It was a sushi restaurant. And I had never heard of sushi except from on The Simpsons. I wanted to give it a go. I didn't really know what sushi was, so I was nervous to try it. And actually, I didn't want to try it by myself, so I tried to get some of my other students to come along, and they all thought it sounded gross. So I went on my own. And I remember walking in, sitting down, and immediately feeling completely out of my depth. All around me, there were plates of food on conveyor belts going round and around. I didn't know what any of it was. And I was just sitting there thinking, what do I do? In the end, I grabbed something off the conveyor belt. It was a roll, it was black, and it had white stuff in it, and in the middle of it was green stuff. I was racking my brain trying to work out what kind of fish had green flesh. But I was courageous, and I ate it, and it was delicious. I actually ate the whole plate. Feeling less afraid, I went back for a second plate. This time, it was similar, but inside it was orange and red. Again, couldn't think of any orange or red fish, but I tried it, and it was good. So I paid, I went back to college, and then a little bit later, I looked at my receipt, and I realized that what I'd been eating was cucumber, peppers, and rice. 20 years later, sushi is much more common. You can find it in packets in pretty much every supermarket. But to be honest, most of the time, it's a bit dry, it's a bit bland, it's quite clearly mass-produced. But still, 2 of my 3 children, they really love it. For a long time, they thought that was the best sushi there was. As far as they were concerned, it was great. Another one of my children tried it. She was not keen. But one day, we spotted a make-your-own sushi kit at the supermarket, and we thought we'd give it a go, and it was really, really good. In fact, it was so good that even the child who said she didn't like sushi, she now likes it. But that got us thinking, what if we really pressed into being good at sushi? So we went to the Asian supermarket in the middle of Farnborough. I don't know if you've been there. We go there a lot. We picked up the genuine imported sushi ingredients. Here's what it looks like. You might have seen sushi in these little packets with the ginger. What we got instead was this pink ginger. And let me tell you, if sushi came on a scale for 1 to 10, if ginger came on a scale from 1 to 10 of gingeriness, this was about a 17 out of 10. It blew my mind. But then we came to the wasabi, and I've eaten wasabi plenty of times. And if you don't know, it's a bit like English mustard. You get that kind of pain in your nose, your eyes water a bit, but it's fine. I can handle it. Not this sushi. Not this wasabi. I realized as soon as I put it in my mouth, I'd made a serious mistake. My face went completely numb. I started coughing. I started crying. And I ended up having to press my head against the table to make the pain go away. The rest of my family found that hilarious. Maybe you can remember what it was like coming to church for the first time. Perhaps this is your first Sunday here. I sometimes think coming to the church for the first time is a bit like my first experience in a sushi restaurant. You're looking around. Maybe you wish you had a friend. Maybe you're trying to figure out what to do. You don't understand what the unwritten rules are. Let me just say, if you are here, if it is your first time, I want you to know you're in good company. New people are walking through these doors every week. Keep coming back. This church will do you good. Maybe your story is like my children's experience. Perhaps you've been eating dry, mass-produced supermarket sushi for a really long time and you think that's the best there is. Maybe you were forced to try it and it put you off for life. Maybe like me, one day you tried the proper ginger and the proper wasabi and it blew your mind. And that's what I'd like to do today. I'd love to tell you what the church is and what it can be. And before we go any further, I want to say that I'm completely biased. I love the church. It shapes not just who I am, it shapes what I know, it shapes where I live, it shapes how I've lived my life out. It tells me who I am. I also want to say I love this church. I just want to say you guys are doing me good, you're doing my family good, and I want to say thank you. I'm really grateful to you. Over recent weeks as a church, we've been exploring the Nicene Creed together. In simple terms, the Nicene Creed is a statement about what Christians believe. It's a summary that's shaped by the truths of Scripture, and it serves as a kind of anchor. That's why the series is called Anchored. It reminds us who God is. It reminds us what the gospel means. It unites us across centuries and across continents. It protects us drifting into confusion or error. And in the Nicene Creed, there's a profound statement on the church. The Creed puts it simply: I believe in one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church. And today we're going to unpack those words one by one. And controversially, we're going to start at the end. Then we can be clear about what the church means. If you look through an English translation of the New Testament, you'll see the word church a bunch of times, 114 in fact. And Jesus says, I will build my church. So we know it's important. But it's important to remember as well that our English word church has been around for a really long time, but it can mean different things to different people, so we're going to define it. Back in the day when the Bible was first written, the original Greek word was ecclesia. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but I said it with confidence. It translates into a called out people. A called out people are not simply gathered by chance, but they're intentionally brought together from a wider crowd to form a distinct community. When we use the word church today, there's a sense of being called out for purpose, assembled as a people who belong together. The church is not just a group, it's a people called from something to something better. It's a people set apart and given a new identity. Eventually, the word church was created, and that English word church is actually derived from another Greek word, which means belonging to the Lord. So we've got two expressions. We've got called out people, and we've got belonging to the Lord. The church isn't simply a group gathered for social reasons or shared interests. Our identity is being anchored as God's own people. We're cherished, we're set apart, and we're defined by our relationship with Him. We're loved by Him. We have our identity not shaped by achievements, backgrounds, or failures, but by His calling and by His acceptance of us. We come together from all sorts of backgrounds today, stories, experiences, and we're not alike. But because God has called us and brought us into His family, that's what makes us the same. Our deepest identity is not found in our individual identities, but it's in that corporate identity as a church. Now, it is true that the word church is used in different ways. For instance, there's an actual legal entity called the Beacon Church Camberley. Now, I've realized, having put these slides on here, that not everybody is on the Charity Commission website every week. But if you went, you'd find us on there. We even own a building. And sometimes when people say church, they're thinking of a legal entity or they're thinking of a building. And of course, those things belong to the Lord, so in a sense, that kind of works. But when we're talking about the church, what we mean is a people, not a building, not a legal entity. We're talking about a people who are called out, a people who belong to the Lord. So now we know what church means, we can have a look at the rest of the definition. I believe in one church. The church is one. And you might think, no, it isn't. You might say, there's thousands of churches, thousands of denominations. There's Anglicans, Baptists, Methodists, Pentecost. I had some fun making up some imaginary churches and throwing them in, but I decided not to use them. There are churches like this one where the music is loud, it's lively, and there's others where there's silence and reverence. Some churches have talks that are short. I was talking to a colleague who says he likes his talks to be like no more than 4 minutes long. There are others, and he couldn't understand why it was taking me so long to write this. There are others where talks finish when they finish. There are different churches which have different ways to organize themselves. Probably, most importantly, different churches sometimes disagree on how to interpret certain parts of the Bible. There are some really good reasons why different churches have started. Sometimes a church movement sees something that's needed and rises up to meet that. I think of William and Catherine Booth. They were moved by the needs they saw among the poor and marginalized in London's East End in the late 1800s. They saw the church wasn't adequately meeting the needs of the poor. They started the Salvation Army, and they had a mission focused on soup, soap, and salvation. That's not easy for me to say. Like Jesus, they met people's physical needs and spiritual needs. Methodism started in the 18th century as a renewal movement. It was a movement that emphasized personal holiness, heartfelt faith, and practical discipleship. And it dealt with the pressing social and spiritual needs at that time. Some types of churches are fantastic at highlighting some parts of God. But sometimes churches also divide, because it is in human nature to divide. And the church isn't immune to that. What we likely need to be most careful about is actually division inside the local church, because the truth is the church is full of people, and people are people. People can be annoying, people can be rude, people can be inconsiderate, people can make decisions you don't like, people can hold views that we don't agree with. And what do we do in that situation? We pursue unity. Unity doesn't mean agreement, it means alignment. And alignment means we all point in the same direction. We don't always share the same opinions. We don't always agree on how things should be done. But genuine unity allows for real difference whilst anchored to the same purpose, and that purpose is following Jesus. Alignment means choosing to walk together in the same direction, even when we see things differently, because we share the same mission. It means setting aside personal preferences for a bigger picture. Unity isn't actually an option for the church, it is its calling. Unity looks like this: bearing with one another, seeking understanding in disagreement, choosing grace over division, celebrating each other's joys, carrying each other's burdens, working together for God's kingdom. When we do that, we reflect God's love to the world. The church is one because we are all equally dependent on the grace and mercy of God. That's what makes us a church. We were all dead in sin, and now Jesus has made us alive. Let me tell you a story about a group of Christians who really understood the church's oneness. Back when the Bible was written, the church in Jerusalem was experiencing severe poverty. Due to famine and persecution, they were being persecuted not only by the Romans, but by the Jews. The church in Jerusalem was in absolute destitution. Paul, one of the early leaders of the church, organized a financial collection amongst all the other churches to try and alleviate support for that church in Jerusalem. But what he didn't do is ask a small cluster of 3 churches in Macedonia. They had small congregations, and they were also struggling with poverty, and they were also struggling with persecution. The churches were described as rock-bottom poor. Perhaps Paul thought it was a bit unkind to ask. Maybe he didn't want to put a bit of pressure on people who were already suffering their own poverty. Perhaps he thought they didn't have anything to give, so they weren't worth asking. Maybe he was just busy. When they heard about their destitute brothers and sisters in Jerusalem, they didn't say, we have it as bad as they do. Instead, despite not being invited to contribute, they begged for the privilege of being allowed to help. Despite their lack, they gave generously beyond what anyone could have expected. Their gift wasn't just financial, it was a declaration. The church is one. We belong to each other. They might have been separated by distance, they might have been separated by culture. They were probably never going to meet. But they were united. They were one body, and they shared each other's burdens. There's a paradox. There's a lot of paradoxes in this talk, actually. Churches can have division, but yet the church is united and it is indivisible in Jesus. The presence of difficulties doesn't mean the church isn't one. It simply means we just have to keep pursuing unity, even when it's hard. Today, I'm covering one section of the Nicene Creed, but I'm also covering another one. I'm going to talk about that now. The Creed also says this: I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. And for all Christians, baptism is hugely important. By getting baptized, we show obedience to God and that we've decided to turn our life around and follow Jesus. If you follow Jesus and you haven't been baptized yet, that would be a really important next step for you. Just so you know, baptism is being immersed in water. And our best interpretation of the Bible is that's something that you do after you've made a decision to follow Jesus. But also, as we're talking about oneness, I also want to just acknowledge there are Christians who genuinely believe you can get baptized before you've made a decision to follow Jesus. That could mean baptizing babies, for instance. I don't agree with that. My interpretation of the Bible doesn't support that. But I also want to say that Christians who believe that are sincerely following God. They're still our brothers and sisters because the church is one. So maybe a disagreement, but we're still aligned. Holiness. The church is holy. That's a bold statement, isn't it? If you've met me, you can say, how can the church be holy when you're in it? No, I'm fine. No, everyone in the church makes mistakes. Everyone struggles. Everyone falls. We fall short of our own standards, and we definitely fall short of God's standards. It feels like a contradiction to say that the church is holy, but it's true and it matters. It's another paradox. The church is holy, yet full of sinners. Here we all are. When we hear the word holy, we often think of moral perfection, flawless behavior, spotless lives. But the Bible's primary meaning of holiness is this: to be set apart, to be different, to be dedicated for a special purpose. And now I'm going to give you my first ever visual prop. Here we go. At our house, we have ordinary plates that we eat off. They get used every single day. They go in the dishwasher. Sometimes they get chipped. Sometimes they get broken. And they are a vessel simply to consume food because, spaghetti in your hands makes a mess. But then we have our special Christmas plates. And they are plates just like any other plate. It's the same shape. It's the same material. It is shiny, though. What makes these plates special, and I'm going to hold it tight because I like these plates, is their purpose. These plates were chosen by me. I'm not even sure if Diane likes them, but they were chosen by me, so they're chosen. They're stored carefully. They're washed by hand. But the really important thing about these plates is when we use them, they announce to our family that this is a special meal. And maybe that's a really good understanding of holiness. Our holiness declares to the world something of God's beauty. The church is made up of ordinary people who get things wrong, people who fall short, but God has set apart this group for a specific purpose, to reflect his purpose into the world. It's not about being flawless, it's about being reflective. And our holiness is positional before it's practical. It doesn't mean we're not called to live righteously, of course we are, but our identity begins with God's choice of us and his presence in our lives. We belong to God, and because we belong to him, we live lives that reflect who he is. Our holiness is not about being perfect, it's about being set apart. And the church is called to show the world what God is like, what Jesus is like, through the way we live our lives. In the early 2nd and 3rd centuries, plagues swept through the Roman Empire. Most people fled to save themselves, but the church stayed behind. They chose to live sacrificially, knowing the risk. Like Jesus, they cared for sick and dying people, many of whom weren't part of the church, and many of those church members lost their lives in the process. Their actions shocked the world. Why? It's because they lived out Christ's love and holiness in real practical ways. They lived differently from a culture of fear and self-preservation. And that witness led countless people to then join the church. That's holiness visibly. Not perfection, but costly love. The church acted just like Jesus. We're not perfect, but we are set apart. And as the church, we get to show God's love in action. Catholic. The next word in the creed might feel confusing. I believe in a Catholic church. Today, when most people hear the word Catholic, they think of the denomination, the Roman Catholic Church. But sometimes words have different meanings in different contexts. Let me explain it this way. Think about the word apple. For hundreds of years, it just meant a fruit. It kept the doctor away. But Apple also, these days, is synonymous with a technology company. Think about it that way. The word Catholic can mean the Roman Catholic, but it's also a word that has a more general purpose. And that general purpose, the best translation I was able to understand, was one that means universal. But actually, the word Catholic has a bit more meaning than the word universal. It's an incomplete translation. It means something more than just everywhere. It describes a wholeness. It describes a fullness. It reflects that the church embraces every single nation and every culture, yet remains one in faith. It's not global, not just global, it's united. The story of the church started like this: small groups of believers in Jerusalem. From there, it crossed deserts to Ethiopia, it crossed the seas to Turkey, it marched down Roman roads to Italy, and it planted faith in an empire that no longer exists, but the church is huge. The empire's gone, the church continued to grow, and it didn't stop. Through the centuries, it leapt borders, spoke almost every language, permeated every culture, whether the church was permitted to exist there or not. Today, across the church, the same message rings out: Jesus Christ is Lord. What began in one city now spans the entire globe, a living testimony to the power of God and the Catholicity of his church. I just want you to think about what's been happening today. As the sun rose across the Pacific, in New Zealand, Christians gathered. In Australia, voices lifted up in praise. In South Korea, churches of 50,000 sang together. In China, millions met in homes and chapels. Across Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, worship rose. In India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, sometimes in public, sometimes in secret, worship rose. In the Middle East, some gathered in ancient stone chapels. Some gathered in hidden communities. In Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, South Africa, songs filled the air. In Europe, in cathedrals, chapels, living rooms, and even in hotels. And later today, believers in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Canada, the United States will gather. All around the world, one faith, one Lord, one church. But it's not just across the globe, it's across time. This week, I spent some time at Abbey. That's one of the privileges I have in my job, to pray in a place where for 1,300 years Christians have gathered to pray. And we were reminded of that as we prayed together. And that's part of what the Catholicity of the church is. It's one faith, one Lord, one church, not just across continents, but across centuries. The church is not bound by geography, ethnicity, national boundaries. It's a global family, united in Christ. That's what we mean when we say Catholic. And then we've got another word, and this is one that, again, you might not use every day: apostolic. Apostolic is a Greek word that means one who is sent. But it's more than that. It carries the idea of authority. Jesus was the first apostle. He was sent by his Father into the world. He had authority to reveal God, to bring salvation, to lay the foundation for the church. Jesus is the ultimate sent one. All other apostles and the church itself are apostolic because we follow Jesus' mission. We're sent because he was first sent. In fact, Jesus says that to us directly. He says, "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." Jesus commissioned 12 people to lay that foundation of the church. They wrote much of the New Testament. They gave the early believers identity and understanding. Apostolic ministry is about building communities on that foundation. And it didn't end when the New Testament was finished. Apostles today don't write the Bible, but they do start churches. They do lay biblical ground. They help churches stay true to its mission. The church is apostolic because it shares Jesus' purpose. It shares his mission. The church is sent because Jesus was sent. Did you know at the Beacon Church, we have a mission statement? This is the mission statement of the Beacon Church. We are here to help people know God, find freedom, discover their purpose, and make a difference. I don't know if you realize it, but that mission statement is apostolic. We're being sent to the people around us. We're being sent into the world with a message of God's goodness. We're building communities, multiplying disciples. We're here to do the things that Jesus did. The Beacon Church is apostolic because it has an apostolic mission statement, and because of what it believes. And we actually don't just have a mission statement, we also have a specific vision, also apostolic. Our vision is a growing church of 500 people, transforming lives and building community. I find that vision really helpful, partly because it tells me that things can't be the same today. Things can't be the same in the future as they are today. We can't be 500 people if we do everything exactly the way we do it today. There's a certain warmth, isn't there, in a small, close-knit community where everybody knows each other. But there are more than 100,000 people in Farnborough, in Camberley, in Fleet, in Yateley, home of the Silverbacks, Ash and Aldershot. People for whom we need to make a space. There aren't enough churches in our local area for all the people who need it. So we've got to make space in ours. Our calling to make Jesus known to the community must outweigh our own comfort, our own personal preferences. It means meeting people and inviting people into our family. As I was writing this, I thought about the evacuation of Dunkirk. I don't know if you know it, to remind you what that was. The evacuation of Dunkirk took place in the Second World War. Hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers were trapped on the beaches of France, surrounded. In a remarkable way, flotillas of military and civilian vessels crossed the English Channel repeatedly to rescue 330,000 troops. Ordinary people disrupted and risked their lives to rescue stranded soldiers. For many of them, they really had no business sailing across the Channel that day. They should have been doing their jobs. But they stepped up. They responded. They became not just witnesses of history, but people who wrote it. They risked their safety to bring people home. And in many ways, this is what I felt as I wrote this talk. It's what we're called to be. We're invited to step out of our comfort zones. We're invited to make sacrifice, embrace change, to open our hearts, to open our lives, to make room for people who are searching for hope. There are lots of them. Just like the Dunkirk evacuators, we need to make room in our community for those who need a lifeline. We're called to change history in this part of the world. For you, perhaps it means stepping up and participating in new ways. It might be as simple as looking out for somebody who hasn't got anyone to talk to and making friends with them. For some of us, that's actually really uncomfortable. For some of us, it's easy. Maybe you already have a tight-knit, close circle of friends. Maybe you're fine as you are. But the mission is too important for us to be content with how things are. The world is aching with loneliness, and being a missional community means we're always making space. That's the kind of church we're called to be, a place where no one stands alone. The band would like to join me. I'm just going to recap. We're one church. We're people joined into a single family, indivisible in Jesus. We're a holy church, set apart to reflect God into the world. We're a Catholic church. We span the world. We cross centuries. One faith, one Lord, one church. We're an apostolic church. We're sent by Jesus on a mission, carrying his good news to everybody. We are the church. We're called out. We belong to the Lord. The church isn't just our best idea of how to organize ourselves. It is God's plan to show his beauty to a weary world. We get to tell the world that death is not the end, that guilt can be forgiven, that shame can be lifted, and that new life is possible. In a world of increasing loneliness, we get to be people's family. In an age drowning in noise and notifications, we get to tell a story that's eternal. Jesus Christ, crucified, risen, reigning, and returning. We don't just tell that story with words, we demonstrate it. The church feeds the hungry, it welcomes the stranger, it defends the vulnerable. We don't stand by while the world suffers. We show the world God's love in practical ways. Jesus compassionately entered our world, drawing close to those who suffered. He walked alongside the broken, and in the same way, we step into the lives of others. We reach out to those who hurt. We listen to those who feel unheard. We care for the lonely and the lost. There's a generation aching for hope, for meaning, for love that doesn't fail, and we know exactly where to find it. We are one body, reconciled across divides of class, race, generation, and culture. We don't gather to escape the world, but to be equipped to change it. We carry God's light into our homes, into boardrooms, into classrooms, into hospital wards, into kitchens, into construction sites, into refugee camps. We come with our scars, our contradictions, our failures, and our sin. And that's why we need the church in the first place. We are a people who know we needed a savior. The world needs the church because the world needs Jesus. Without the church, the gospel is silent. With the church, the love of God becomes visible, tangible, and unstoppable. As we sing together, stewards are going to bring bread and wine for communion. We're going to demonstrate our Catholicity by doing something the church has done all over the world today and for thousands of years. Jesus' body broken, his blood spilled. Our best understanding of the Bible is that sharing bread and wine together is for people who would say, I belong to the Lord. And if that's not you, let it pass you by. This is the one part of our meeting today that's for followers of Jesus. However, if you do want to be a follower of Jesus, feel free to take part, perhaps for the first time. As bread and wine comes around, please hang on to it. Grant's going to come up later and tell us what to do with it. But I just want to remind you that the Bible closes with a wedding. After all the battles, after all the tears, after the waiting, the bride stands before her bridegroom. She's radiant and clothed in white. She's prepared for the day she was made for. From the beginning in Eden to the last song in Revelation, God has been pursuing people for himself. And that people is us, the church. So let's turn our eyes fully towards Jesus. He's the bridegroom that calls us his beloved. The church shines because he's declared us beautiful. Jesus, the Son of God, left heaven willingly and stepped into the mess of our world. He drew near with intimacy and compassion, and in return, he endured suffering and rejection, all to win us. He gave his life, pouring out mercy and grace, that we could be cleansed from every stain, every regret, and every brokenness. His mission is our mission. But death couldn't hold him. He rose again, triumphing over darkness and despair. And he's coming back for us. One day, we will stand before him, clothed in his righteousness, the bride and the bridegroom. Let's praise his name together.
Hey guys, before you go, we just want to say a massive thank you for watching this video today. My name's Chris. I'm part of the leadership team here at the Beacon Church. You know, as a church, we have a big vision. We believe that we exist to help people to know God, to find freedom, to discover their purpose, and to make a difference. If this video has made a difference in your life today, then make sure you check out our other content in our playlist. We believe it's going to really help you out. And don't forget to like and subscribe as you go. Well, that's all from me today. Take care. God bless.